This is a Nekko Media podcast.
What's your pleasure, sir?
Welcome, cinephiles and Cenobites, to another Cinebite, number 61. I am your hostess, Annika P., Cinderella Hellborn, mother of Grendel, bringer of chains, Dan Stevens enthusiast. On today's episode, Mox and Ono are joined by writer, director, editor, producer, Tyler MacIntyre. His most latest directorial feature is the horror comedy Tragedy Girls. We learn about his background in film, a little bit about his work on Tragedy Girls and Patchwork, his thoughts on storyboards, and his favorite movies of all time. Listen to their conversation on this segment, Schrody's Ladder.
All right, we'd like to welcome to the show Tyler MacIntyre, director, writer, editor, producer. His most recent film is Tragedy Girls, released in the fall of 2017. Really nice comedy horror.
Thanks so much for having me.
Sorry, I was just about to gush all over him.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Tyler, for joining us, man.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. No, I'm excited to unpack some of this stuff with you guys. Even the preliminary discussion's been fun.
Yeah, for sure.
So, could you give the listeners just a little background on your background?
Yeah, sure. So I'm based in Los Angeles now, but I'm actually originally from Canada. A very small town that no one's ever heard of in Alberta, and so I kind of started making movies when I was a kid. Like I watched a lot of genre movies growing up. Like I was actually just talking with somebody about this today, but like the Full Moon series, like with the Puppet Masters with like videos.
Yes.
Yeah.
Where they kind of like that was one of the early things where you'd finish watching a movie, and for those people who maybe aren't old enough for this, like when you used to rent certain movies done by this company called Full Moon on the VHS, they would have like a behind the scenes, essentially like kind of like a DVD extra before DVDs, and so there'd be you get to see the artists and craftsmen and people kind of behind the movies, like working in Burbank, and you could kind of, if you watched different more movies from the same company, you would get kind of a feel of it. And that was really the first time for me that I was like, oh, like people make movies, and it occurred to me that was an actual thing that could be done. And so I started kind of getting pretty into it like by myself, and then eventually found some friends who were kind of into it, and conned people into helping us, and then we made little VHS movies on little camcorders, and then eventually digital kind of took over when I was in high school and started editing on a Mac on the Apple Final Cut, and the movies got gradually more sophisticated, and I ended up moving to Los Angeles to do a master's at the American Film Institute. And then just kind of worked for Roger Corman very briefly, did a tour of duty over there.
Nice.
And then just eventually, I was editing and kind of directing short films and writing, and looking for my first kind of opportunity to direct something, and ended up, our feature-wise, and ended up making a movie called Patchwork in 2014.
Yeah.
And at the very end of 2014, and then they came out in 2015 at festivals, and then it's actually on Netflix currently. If anyone wants to check that out, it's kind of like a Frankenstein movie. It's like a horror comedy that's essentially about three girls who go out partying one night and end up getting stitched together in the same body, and they can kind of still communicate, sort of like Inside Out style. But even though they share a body, and then they have to kind of work together to go on this revenge mission to find who did this to them. And it ended up being kind of a lot of fun, kind of, sort of like Dead Alive or Reanimator, kind of those old sort of splatter, like splat stick movies,
Right.
On the comedy. Yeah. And then that led pretty specifically into Tragedy Girls. Like we pretty much off the first cut of that, we got to direct we got to write another movie called Tragedy Girls. And then I got to direct that in summer 2016, and that just came out last year. And I'm working on the next one,
Wow. Keeping busy.
yeah.
That's awesome.
how long before your feature debut? How many shorts and all of that? How long was that road?
I mean, it was pretty long. I'd been doing stuff by myself since I was probably about 12, and I directed the Patchwork when I was about 30. So like a long time. But I would say like I never like after I went to college, things got really kicked into high gear. Like I was doing more movies or doing more like short films while I was going to college, even though I wasn't taking film. Like I was taking psychology for my undergrad, and then but I was spending all my time kind of making movies, and then I ended up going to grad school, and that was a film school, and that therefore I got to actually focus on that a little bit more, and then started working professionally after that finished up. And then but I would say, I mean, I don't know, number of shorts like that I would show people, maybe like 10 or 12, but
Nice.
probably, I mean, I don't know, probably 50 more that I wouldn't show anybody, that are like but I also like wrote things that other people directed, and I also edited a lot of things that I wouldn't that I didn't write or direct. I also kind of helped produce a lot of shorts for other people and things like that. I'm often on like the team in some way for a lot of shorts, and that's probably how you get up to a number like that. But just ones that I'm the kind of the more sole voice on that I'm proud of. We're probably about 12, and then I have maybe 20 that I kind of hide.
It sounds like you have a very strong background in editing.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, like I went to the American Film Institute for editing specifically. So just because I couldn't get into the directing program, so it was like even though I had a bunch of shorts that I thought were that I would subsequently learn were kind of competitive to where the bar was. They just didn't want to take me, or somebody else had a theory that maybe it's because if you apply for more than one program, they get so many on the directing side, they just kind of don't consider you as seriously. I assume I just wasn't up to par, so I realized that like, oh well, the editors get to go to more classes than the directors actually, and you can audit directing classes. So I did that and like audited cinematography classes, and it ended up I think getting a lot more out of it, because I didn't I ended up like writing some of the shorts that we did at AFI, and learning a lot, kind of shitting shotgun for a lot of things and seeing people make mistakes. And so when I was finally ready to do my first feature, I'd had a lot of like, that's the good thing about being an editor is if you do it right, you can really learn a lot by proxy, like because you're as close to the footage, or maybe even closer in some ways than the director is. And so you can see like how scenes are put together, and it gives you a certain amount of confidence. Like I tend to have a very specific way that I edit things, and so therefore I only shoot kind of what I'm going to use, and it kind of scares people, like particularly producers that are new to working with me,
Right.
because they're like, "Whoa, you didn't grab this shot," and I'm like, "Well, we're not going to need it," and then we argue about it, and I end up shooting it just so they feel okay, and then they see the edit of it, and they're like, "Oh, right, you didn't need it." And once you go through that process, then usually they leave me alone. But it's you can save a lot of time. But and I'm not a big fan of just kind of doing traditionally covered scenes. I think there's ways to leave yourself options editorially, but commit to some decisions that'll both save you time on set, which you usually don't have enough of, and give your movie a little bit more personality.
That's true. I did one of my favorite parts of Tragedy Girls is the flow. I really like the transitions, and I feel that it helps maintain the pace really well. And they're also kind of clever cuts too.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, and like those were kind of like like I write them into the script, like with Chris Hill. We'd kind of brainstorm what they might look like, and then I work with Pavel Pogorzelski, who's my cinematographer. And then kind of figure out how we're going to do them, and then we'd have to essentially remember how they all worked, so that on set we could shoot them, because a lot of them you have to get right on the day, and then obviously collaborating with Martin, who ended up editing Tragedy Girls, and did a great job. It ended up kind of making the movie kind of feel a little bit like it gives it that flow, and it kind of feels like dominoes, ideally, like falling kind of where each scene
does.
There's people who do this way better than I do, by the way, but I mean.
Now, as being an editor as well yourself, are you like in the bay while it's being cut, kind of over the shoulder, or are you just like, this is my vision, find the best way to do it?
Oh, when I'm working with another editor, or when I'm editing my own movie?
You said for this film, it was put
Oh yeah,
together by.
sorry. So yeah, with Martin, I think he kind of like initially was maybe a little skeptical, since I had an editing background, like not for any nefarious reason or anything, but because we hadn't worked together yet, and so he
Right.
had previously cut like a bunch of movies, like really high profile films, like he cut Dallas Buyers Club, like
Wow.
yeah, like he got nominated for an Academy Award for that, like.
God damn.
He's a good editor, like a really good, very smart editor. But he liked our script a lot and wanted to kind of, I think, do something that was a little bit lighter, a little more genre, to kind of open up the type of movies that he would be approached about, and so like we were lucky to get him, so it was good to have him on the team, and he'd worked a lot with Pavel, who's the cinematographer I mentioned. Like Martin actually came out to Kentucky where we shot and would kind of cut as we were going, and then I would come and spend a little time with them. But I tried not to micromanage because I've worked enough as an editor that I know that like when you see a first cut, you're looking for certain things, and even though it's not exactly how I would do it or how it's planned to do it, like I like seeing other people's ideas and how they approach it, because I know every cut after that is going to get closer and closer to what I intended. So it was good to see like some fresh ideas, because he's kind of a genius, and so it was good to see some other ways of looking at scenes that I didn't initially see. But yeah, man, I mean, like I would say I gave him space. Like we cut it pretty quickly for I think it was probably the shortest schedule Martin's ever worked on. Yeah, I mean, I think it was a pretty healthy collaboration. I also think he liked that I could take the footage and go away for a bit and then just kind of look at stuff and then maybe try a few things and then go back, and then I could show him something, we could talk about it, and then see what we can incorporate into the cut. And it was just a little bit, so he had more time to kind of work on things the way he felt that they needed to be worked on. And I didn't have to be over his shoulder all the time, and there was like a trust there.
Awesome. So I would say it sounds like, you being an editor, you respect the editor's position, and you definitely didn't want to be like over his shoulder, breathing down his neck.
Yeah, I mean, you do need to kind of like work on it and stuff like that. And there were certain scenes that were harder than others. Like we worked a long time on that scene we talked to before I think we started rolling, which was the scene kind of at the end of the movie where the two girls it's sort of the emotional climax when the two girls are having this kind of long dialogue scene together. And that was very hard to get, because like on the day it was tough to shoot, because it was very warm in there, and then like there was a lot of distractions because the school was operating when we were it was shut down for most of our shoot, but then on that day it was back in session. Oh. So there was things out of our control, and it was a lot of pressure on Alex. It's a very long scene and stuff like that. So we ended up shooting some stuff later, like with those little flashbacks of the kids and stuff. So it ended up being like gradual process of putting that scene together. It was very challenging. That was one of the ones where we worked the hardest on together in the room. But the rest of the time, like usually he had a very functional version of the scene very early, and we were able to get on the same page quick.
I wanted to ask about that particular scene at the end with Jack and Alex and Brianna. Mox is the one that actually pointed out. So at that point in the movie, Brianna's character she's already past the tragedy girls thing. She's like, it seems like she's over it, and now she just wants to do good and I guess forget all of that stuff. But her transition back into being friends with Alex's character was kind of all of a sudden. For Brianna's character, was that intended? Like, yeah,
I mean, a little bit. Like, yeah, like I mean, that's a good point. I mean, like, ideally, I was thinking that she's conflicted. Okay. So like they things are going well, and then eventually things start to get a little out of hand. Like the police are getting pretty close to them.
Yeah.
And also she's a teenager. She's going through a lot of weird emotions and things like that, and she does legitimately feel like she is emotionally attached to Jack and cares about him in some way. And then also they're getting a lot of pressure from like the public and things like that. So then she, and her and Michaela aren't on the same page and have started to kind of mistrust each other. And so then once they have a blow up kind of at the end of the second act in the gym, and it ends up being like, like they kind of have, they sort of stop talking to each other. And then she runs kind of full on into Jack, and then they start dating and go to prom together. And then from that point, we really wanted to make it feel like she doesn't fit in that world, like she's at the prom and she's having a good time sorry, she's supposed to be having a good time, but she's not. Like, so like everyone around her's having fun, and she like wins prom queen, and all this stuff is very, stuff that a lot of young kids would want.
Yeah.
But it's not her. Like she's too odd, and she does, like, none of this means anything to her, especially if she doesn't have anyone to share it with that she cares about. And then Michaela essentially shows up and says, like, look, I'm still committed to this idea, and like like, I think you're lying to yourself because I know you. And then that's like during that scene, she really convinces her, and she kind of reminds her that, like, like, you talked me into this, back in the day, and we're both committed, and I still believe in it if you do. And then that's where they get on the same page during that that scene. But I think the audience, like, it seems like it's a bit out of nowhere. I think because you don't necessarily know that she switched, because you're on Jack's side. Like, Jack sees the world in a very, Jordan, the character Jordan, sees the world very, morally, like, regular way. Like he, good and evil and stuff like that. But he's blinded by her. Like he thinks that she's a beautiful girl and she loves me and whatever. But he doesn't really know her. Like, he definitely doesn't know the real her, nor does he want to. Like, and
right.
So like, that's kind of what it's about, is like he's lying to himself anyway. And like, I think I really like how they kind of played that. I think that you don't necessarily catch it on the first go through, but I think Rihanna is playing that, like, oh, she gets convinced, and you see her get convinced, and then but then you get distracted by Jack kind of like trying to be heroic, and then the thing with Lowell on the side. And then everything kind of comes full circle when you realize that, oh no, this is a movie about them, not a movie about him.
Right. Oh, okay.
I liked how it played out. Ultimately, it just felt a little whiplashy, but I do feel that you did set the seed of the roots of being a stronger connection between the two girls.
Part of what we were trying to do is kind of like, as soon as Jack becomes her boyfriend or whatever, or Jordan, the character, he becomes a little bit more controlling, and he starts kind of cutting her off and not listening to her and things like that. And he starts taking her for granted almost immediately, and not even realizing that she doesn't feel like she's a part of this. Anyway, I think there's something to be said about, that sort of like narrative that was very popular when I grew up, or when I was growing up, watching like Can't Hardly Wait and things like that, like where it's like, like you have like these very like kind of beta male, like kind of often slacker sort of characters who like love these people from afar, even though they don't really know anything about them. And I like harpooning that idea, because that's bullshit. Like, that's not a real life thing. Like, and I think it actually kind of breeds this sort of resentful kind of like postmodern misogyny that I wanted to kind of.
He does kind of impose his ideal, I guess, on her, right? And
exactly, and he really doesn't know her, and that's what, and she, that's literally what she tells him before she kills her, or she kills him.
Yeah, and
I like that scene where he just hangs. Oh, go ahead. Oh, no,
well, I was gonna say, yeah, like out of all the deaths in this movie, like, I think Jordan gets it the worst, like
the most painful.
Like, not only is his heart broken, but like, he's dying.
He like dies slowly, choking. His life is like choked out of him, looking at her, and she's like, "Yeah, that's sorry, dude."
I was like, "Oh, dude, spoiler. Sorry."
Another funny thing about that scene is like I really like how it looks. Like, it was a very difficult scene to shoot, but I think Pavel, like the cinematographer, did a great job on the scene. Like, it's slowly, you gotta have this weird like orange light, kind of, and then he had to phase in this black light because their masks are fluorescent paint, so they kind of have to glow a little bit. So he had this weird thing going on where he was like slowly adding these like two different like this bright orange light and this like kind of like black light to make the masks pop, and he was slowly introducing it during the scene, and I didn't even really notice what the hell was going on until we got to that final shot where you see Jordan kind of hanging, and it's like this push in on the two shot. And you're like, oh, it's like they're fucking standing in front of the gates of hell, and the masks are popping, and I was just like, damn, Pavel's good. Fuck, like,
nice.
But yeah, he actually just had a movie come out. Like, he shot Hereditary, which has been doing really well.
Oh wow, really? Nice.
Yeah.
It's like it's a great cast. Like, when we first saw it, I'm like, Craig Robinson's in this, and he helped produce the movie.
Yeah. So Craig came on pretty early. Like he was, obviously like a very prolific actor and a great comedian, and so he was looking for opportunities of things to maybe produce, and so they look like his people and him kind of took a look at the script and got it and thought it was funny, and so we were kind of fishing around for the leads, and then once we got the girls on board, then he was like, oh hey, maybe I could play this part, and so we were like, of course, oh my god. So he ended up being in the movie as well as a producer, which is great.
Nice, Big Al, and
Yeah.
Kevin Durant too is the man in this movie.
Yeah, I like Kevin a lot. Yeah, he's Canadian as well, but
Oh, nice.
he's a pretty accomplished actor. Like he went to the National Theatre School up in Canada, which is pretty crazy.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, he's awesome. And I think he spent a lot of because he kind of has a sort of malevolent kind of energy. So I think
he definitely does.
Yeah, I think he's trying to spend his life like avoiding these parts, but I think once he kind of realized that this one was a bit more of a like a kind of parody of that.
Yeah.
He could play that, and he just kind of parachuted in for like I think we only shot with him 3 days, and a lot of the time when it's in the mask is a stunt person named Casey Hendershot, who's actually a really great actor as well. And so they've worked very well together to kind of figure it out.
Nice. Yeah, I liked him in Dark Was the Night, and I definitely think he can play less malevolent characters, but he definitely does have an edge and kind of a darkness about him, and it was fun to see him kind of parody that.
Totally. Yeah, he's a very smart performer.
Tyler, I was checking out your videos on Vimeo.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Did you edit those? Like
which ones?
The Navigator.
Oh, the Navigator. Yeah, I wrote that. That's actually based on and wrote and edited that. That was one of the movies we did at AFI. That's just that's actually based on my some stories my grandfather told me because he was a navigator in World War II.
Oh, wow.
And so I like the idea of doing like an all-in-one room kind of short film because it's student film, so you can't really do like heavy period.
Yeah.
And there's not that many movies about like the Air Force. So like I wanted to combine a couple of ideas that we had as we built kind of the interior of one of those planes, those Halifax bombers, and they did a lot during the war. It's kind of heavy bombers with 4 propellers, and then try to come up with like a tension piece. And I mean, it went well. I mean, it was a 4-day shoot, I think.
Yeah.
It was kind of a fun sort of thing. But again, that was one of those projects which I really like and think turned out well. And Lauren Hilster did a great job directing it, and Katie Wheelock did a great job designing it. But again, it was and the producer on it was John Negaponis, who produced Patchwork. So a lot of people I liked and continued working with. But yeah, I mean, it was again a bit weird because I wrote it and edited it, but didn't direct it, so it was kind of strange.
Nice. Well, yeah, it turned out it was a nice short. Enjoyed that one.
Cool. You guys did a really deep dive. No, I've never been asked the Navigator before. Holy shit!
Oh, okay, right on.
Is it easy for you to kind of distance yourself to let someone else direct something that you've written, and especially something as personal as that, stemming from your grandfather's story?
Oh yeah, totally. I've worked on a lot of movies over the years. Just in various, like I've been a scriptie, I've PA'd, I've AD'd, like I've done a lot of, different positions on film sets, so I can very easily kind of switch modes into like being a supportive person, like in a kind of more like a soldier kind of,
Right.
But remain invested. But I get very excited about trying to. I don't need to make all the calls, at
Right.
all, and often, even when you are directing, like you're always collaborating with people and, pulling in ideas and finding, trying to give them room to kind of bring their own take to it. I would say that I actually welcome that opportunity, and I'm looking for more things to produce and for other people to try and get them because it is tough to find opportunities to direct stuff. Especially if you haven't done it before, which is kind of the catch-22 of it. But I kind of expect that you can find like a new voice, give them resources that it takes to be successful.
What would you say is the most difficult aspect or part of filmmaking?
I would say, like after the movie's made, getting it out into the world properly. Like I would say, marketing is probably the most difficult. The thing is most often done incorrectly, like marketing and sales. Like distribution, like it used to be back in the day, like most movies would get lost because there was just no place to actually get them. Whereas now you can get a lot of things from iTunes or these streaming services and things like that. So like accessibility is not the problem anymore. Now it's like visibility. And so I find that it's that's the part that is become the challenge in the last couple of years.
And how are you kind of working around that? I guess there's the flood of products. How are you getting yours more visible?
I mean, I'm not really. I mean, like I'm trying to. I would say that overall, I was maybe a little disappointed in how the marketing went with Tragedy Girls, and Patchwork was a much smaller enterprise, so it's a little bit, the expectations were lower. But I like that distribution company that handled it. So it was. I've been really just trying to be part of the community. Like horror is very dedicated, and so a lot of people kind of know each other and things like that. So like when possible, I'd like to take opportunities like this where you can, talk with people who have, like podcasts or like write for things and stuff like that to try and, just meet new people and get the word out. And, but I also try and, when possible, help people out, to try and, keep the ball rolling, because I figure that's kind of how everyone's going to rise, is that if people kind of work together. But, I would really say that, it's still very much my Achilles heel, as I said, but, which with each project, I definitely learn more and more.
Right. Would you, in creating the stories, are you purposefully trying to think of fresh ideas, or just whatever you happen to feel passionate about?
Yeah, I mean, fortunately, I think the things that I feel most passionately about are things that seem a little fresh. Like, I definitely get very excited when I have an idea that feels like it'll is timely and kind of like tries to do something new. Because
Right.
like for me, it's really trying to find opportunities to kind of push the ball forward, either for the genre or for movies in general, or like attack ideas that I feel are not particularly positive. Like as I mentioned before, this kind of like, like that they can't hardly wait stereotype I mentioned before. Like I feel like that's kind of a negative trope that had become very pervasive in teen movies, and so I liked that there was an opportunity to comment on that.
Right. Oh no, I'm surprised you have not asked about storyboarding.
Storyboarding. Oh yeah. Well, we'll get to that. Okay. Well, actually, let me ask you right now. What are your thoughts on storyboarding? Is it important or no?
Oh, I hate it.
Oh.
Yeah, but that's just because and I'll tell you why. So
Yeah. Okay.
so like I have done. I do tend to do them like for practical reasons. I tend to do them in like for complex sequences, usually involving stunts or effects. But I find that most often they don't matter because like here's kind of what happens. Like you'll come up with your shot list, which is for me is just literally a list.
Yeah.
Of like wide shot that does this, kind of thing, and I know what it means. And I usually line a script so that I know what shots will be, sort of like what a script supervisor will eventually come up with. I kind of do that in pre-production, so you can see like how many shots there are of what type in the scene and what action they cover. And I tend to stick pretty closely to that. Like it doesn't deviate much between the final edit and what I kind of wrote down. I've come to realize. And so, but like people will really like crew members in particular will be like, oh, we need storyboards, like, and they'll really fight for them. And then I find that like on the day, that just means like when you're shooting it, you go there and then they look at the storyboards and you're like, okay, great, look at the storyboards. Here's what we're doing. And then they'll look at them, they'll glance at them for a moment, and then they'll look at you and be like, so how's this going to go down? And whereas if you have a script and your shot list, they still glance at it for a moment and then they'll look at you and say, how's this going to go down? And then you have to explain it to them anyway, so it's a really annoying, kind of thing. There are people who do actually like it's the most effective, I think, with effects people, because they do literally will understand, like, oh, we're actually going to see the left side of this dummy's face, so therefore I'm going to spend time on that, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And so like that stuff I think is more helpful, because then they actually it's more of like a contract, an agreement that, like, no, we're only going to see that from this angle, kind of thing, and then that gives them security. Whereas I would rather they just make the whole thing look good, and then I can, whatever. But I understand that they only have so much time. So like I definitely don't need it for my own process, just because I only need to explain it to the cinematographer, and only a shot at a time, really.
Yeah.
So it's like I don't find it helps me, but I also know that people who, especially people who come from like animation backgrounds, or like particularly commercial backgrounds where they force you to do it, is like they definitely are like, oh, I haven't done my boards, and I just like that. It seems like more of a hindrance at that point to me, because then you also have a hard time like rethinking things if something doesn't go right.
Yeah.
Whereas like I can, and that's part of, like, I guess, having a bit of an editing background, is it gives you that flexibility.
Nice. Because we have a friend, CK. Shout out to CK, who just doesn't do them at all. He just goes straight to filming.
I do find that people, like, you got to do either shot lists or storyboards, and certain people do certain things, and for me, I'm definitely a list guy.
Sure. All right.
Well, we'll give context to CK. He has been working on the same short film for 3 years, so.
So maybe he should have storyboarded it.
He should have.
I mean, there are other problems, right? But yeah, it's like, come on, Kurt, storyboard it, just do it.
Okay, so with that shot list, so do you work behind the camera during shooting days?
Yeah, I mean, the director is generally behind the camera. What do you mean, like?
Like you actually do the?
Oh, you mean, sorry? Do I operate the camera?
Yeah.
I used to do that a lot more, like, early on, like on shorts and things like that. And then once I went to AFI, there was a lot more like a lot more rigid positions. So like if you're working with a cinematographer, they generally want to operate the camera.
I see. Okay.
So I got used to sitting at the monitor, and then explaining like the lens choices and things like that, and then being like, no, we got to lower it down, and then they eventually tune. You get on the same page after a while.
Yeah.
But it is frustrating to make that transition. But yeah, no, I would definitely say I tend to be more at the monitor or beside the camera, looking at the AC's monitor, which I try to avoid because I know it pisses them off. But yeah, I tend to be looking at a monitor, all things considered.
And how long do you, or how closely, I guess, do you work with the cinematographer? Is a lot of it kind of mapped out in pre-production, or you still are kind of having to do a bulk of it while you guys are actually shooting?
Oh, no. I mean, it mostly happens you're always revamping things a little bit, but I generally have a shot list, before we start shooting, and then you can. So then I talk it through with the cinematographer in pretty extensive meetings. Like we usually have kind of meetings take about half a day, where we can go through maybe 10% of the script, and we have 10 of those, kind of thing. And then once we kind of are on the same page and we've talked it all through, then I can revise the shot list, and that's what we go into production with. And then at the top of every week, then we always go over it again, after we already know the locations and everything like that, to make sure we know that in what order we're going to shoot what thing on the day, and then you refine that with your AD to kind of coordinate with all the departments and things like that. But that's how things, and that's obviously not like on a production where you have all those positions filled. But if it gets smaller and smaller, you don't need to do that sort of stuff, because there's not as many people to communicate it to. As long as you like if you have a cinematographer you trust, or if you're shooting it yourself, you just have to prioritize based on how to give yourself the most time, I find, for like performances and things like that are can require more.
Speaking of priorities, where would you prioritize, with the limited budget? Where are the I guess aspects where you just, if we got to spend money, these are the places we just cannot skimp?
I would say that I try not to skimp on cameras and lenses. Because if you shoot on like a large format camera, things tend to and how to light it professionally, that'll make you can make your very small movie, your $100,000 movie look like a $2 million movie. Like you can make it look extremely professional, with skill and just certain number of the right tools. But that said, you can also do that with like prosumer grade cameras and things like that. But it generally takes more time, and you have some limitations. But I would say that I tend to be a bit of a stickler for the format, and then I usually do a lot of posts myself if there's no real money for that. So, so that's never been a concern. But I know that that's a challenge for a lot of people, like is saving money for post production, and then they often will shoot a movie that's competently shot, and then don't have anybody to edit it properly. And I mean, like, not technically, I mean creatively. Like there's a lot of soft skills that go into editing that often. Well, I have Adobe Premiere, I could do, and they. And there's like, a lot of like personal taste that comes into it, and like sense of rhythm, and a lot of these things that you sort of take for granted now that it's very accessible. And so I would say that for myself, I try and get the resources that my cinematographers can have at least a bare minimum number of resources to make the product look as well as they can photographically. And then for other people, I would encourage them to maybe consider more putting money into like collaborating with an up and coming like editor if they don't do it themselves.
Okay. What kind of equipment was used to shoot Tragedy Girls? Were there a bunch of different cameras, or one camera, tons of different lenses?
We had Cook, Prime, Anamorphics, I believe, and we had an Alexa Mini and then an Alexa XT or something. I can't remember exactly the other. We had an Alexa Mini and then another Alexa, and then the same set of lenses was shared between them.
Oh, nice.
But I would say that my first movie was shot like I think we had Optimus Zooms, and it was like a Red Scarlet.
Oh.
Yeah, with a dragon chip.
Can I ask about Patchwork?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that movie. And I tried to I described it to Mox as like a Body Parts meets Herman's head kind of deal. I don't know. But it was really creatively shot and told, like Jennifer, Ellie, and the Madeline characters just going in and out from as three individuals, and then as one person. Who played the one that was the one person, I guess, or the actual patched up human?
We called that female Frankenstein character Stitch.
Stitch. Okay.
Nice.
But she that was played by Tori Stolper, who played Jennifer.
Oh, okay.
And in pretty much all the scenes, and then it was played once by Tracy Fairway in this shot where Jennifer appeared by herself.
Hey, so Tyler, what makes a great film for you? I guess as an audience member, as a lover of movies. I know it's super broad.
Yeah, it's very broad. I mean, I love all sorts of different kinds of movies. I would say that like I tend to like movies that kind of surprise me. Nowadays, like anytime I can be very forgiving of them. Like I would be a horrible critic, to be honest. Like because I love almost everything. Like I find very positive things in movies that I feel like there's a lot of like pressure when you go see a movie to be like, that sucked, or you're supposed to have some sort of extreme opinion nowadays, or that's great, like I feel like there's things like even like Rotten Tomatoes or IMDb, like a lot of these things are sort of pressuring you to have a very polarized opinion, whereas these are actually kind of complex pieces of art that can be enjoyed on multiple levels, and it's probably not going to be a love or hate thing. It's probably going to be somewhere in the middle, I would say. So I often find like even something like if I don't like a particular like movie, I often like there's scenes in it that I really find something interesting. I would say pretty much anytime I find something that has a very unique tone or does something in a way that I haven't seen before, that's very interesting to me because I do consume a lot of films. And and so I praise ingenuity over pretty much anything else. Like if you're, very you're finding an original way to tell a story, like that'll get me excited, way quicker than high production values or stars or really any other element.
Nice. Okay. Say the idea is good, but they kind of fall flat in the execution. Just the fact that it was something new, you totally appreciate, and you are forgiving, I guess, about the execution.
Oh, totally. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I definitely, I mean, for me personally, like there's all sorts of, like examples of movies that I, like that are not super polished, but have like a great, idea of, like one of my favorite movies the last couple of years is this, actually probably about 5 years old now. There's a movie called The Dirties. Do you guys see that? It won Slam Dance, like, I don't know, 5 years ago, like 2013. But it's directed by this guy named Matt Johnson, and it was like a kind of done in like a faux documentary style.
Oh, okay.
Like it's a little bit like Man Bites Dog, if you've seen that, but not nearly as artsy. Like it kind of feels like you're watching footage from some high school students who are just fucking around with the camera and trying to make a movie for a class project, and then it kind of it's super funny, similar to something like Superbad, like they're that hilarious together.
Right.
As it goes on, it starts to kind of get like it gets a little bit darker and a little bit darker, and it kind of introduces these kind of like school shooting elements to it.
Wow.
Which gets like, and it's just so well handled. But the movie's super lo-fi, like and because it's shot like a high school movie, like it's shot on a consumer grade camera, and it's it's cut like that. And anyway, and I just thought it was so creative and so it was such a brilliant way to not have a budget and do it very intelligently. And so like that was a big reference for me. Not for any of my movies, like I make very different types of movies than those guys, but like that, I bring that example up as like a way to kind of work within your constraints and still find a way to do something that's very original.
Nice. I like that. I might have to check that out.
Yeah, that looks good.
Yeah. They also made a follow-up movie called Operation Avalanche, which is a very similar sort of idea, but it's set in the 60s. And it's about some people faking the moon landing, and it's also like bonkers. You should definitely check it out.
Nice. And they're shot on like consumer grade cameras.
Oh I think the first one was shot on like a PD 150 or something, like something, or maybe HVX, yeah.
Wow.
Like, and like I don't think it was standard depth, so it probably wasn't PD 150, but like I think it was like an HVX, and then or Panasonic HVX, and then the other one was shot on I think 16 millimeter.
Okay, I'm interested to check that out.
So according to IMDb, we got in development status on Nightlight. Can I ask about that? Is that still in pre-production mode, or?
That is a movie that's in development. So we wrote a movie. We wrote that script on spec, and then ended up getting sold to Columbia Pictures, and so that's probably our first studio movie. And so Chris and I, who wrote Tragedy Girls and Patchwork together, wrote this script. And then we're working with Unique Features on it, and the producer on it's Bob Shea, who's great because he, did the Lord of the Rings series and Nightmare on Elm Street, and really, like a very, great resource. And Vince Gatewood is kind of his kind of up and coming producer with that company, who's been great. And so we've been slowly working through. We've done a revised draft of that. And, it's looking good, and we're hoping to shoot it, early next year.
Nice.
That is awesome, dude. Congrats on that.
Thanks.
Are you excited or kind of iffy about working with a studio within the confines of the studio?
No, I mean, I'm super excited about it, actually. I mean, I think like anybody who's kind of transitioning from indie to studio stuff. I mean, I get like a little bit like things are maybe moving a little slow for like just in terms of like it's a big machine that needs to move because it's but I think that they've been great to collaborate with. I think the script's gotten a lot better than they have. I haven't encountered any of what you think of as like cliche like like studio notes. Like they've been amazing. Like they actually have really smart people in there, and the project's getting a lot better kind of working with them.
Nice. Well, I guess lastly we would like to ask you if you have a top 6 list of all-time favorite films? Any order, just standouts, any genre.
Wow.
Ever.
Top
Ever.
6.
Again with the broad. Yeah, sorry. Just
It's so
any.
specific. Like it's not even top 5. Like it's like um
There's always got to be
uh,
that 6-1 that doesn't make the
that's
top
what,
5.
yeah, well we can start off like number 1 for me is definitely Back to the Future.
Oh,
Uh
okay. Wow.
Okay.
have you guys seen that?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Back
Love
to the
it.
Future. Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
I know that that was probably the dumbest question. Everybody's seen Back to the Future, but it's so
Well, which of the three is your most favorite? Is it just the first one?
well, yeah, definitely. I mean, they're a great series,
Yeah.
but the 100%. Like it's yeah, I think that movie's genius. I think there's some great stuff in number 2 as well. And number 3 is not as good as the other two, but is a totally great way to round out the series. Like and as a trilogy, they're awesome. But the first one is like next level perfect film. Like that, there I would say that I take very little issue with that movie. You know, it's like it's perfectly cast. It's such a like amazing score. You know, like it's cut by one of the best editors, Arthur Schmidt, and you know, Sean Cundy, who's one of the best cinematographers who ever lived. Like you know, Robert Zemeckis did a great job on it. Like the whole all the people working on that movie are kind of at the top of their game. And it just happened to kind of work out. I feel perfectly. Like there's you know, it has a great arc for George McFly more than Marty McFly, but you know, and there's a lot of things about it that don't 100% seem like they should work. But together, you know, you just get caught up into it, and you buy every second of that journey. And I don't know. I think it's one of the best movies ever made, if not the best movie ever made.
For sure. For sure. Like it's like at this point though, like when we watch that movie, it's like I'm always hoping to find something that I've never seen before or just didn't catch. And like I think at this point it's not gonna happen. I've seen everything that needs to be seen from this movie, but it's still
Oh yeah, and I say that every time I watch it too. But then I caught it in the theater here in LA at the Chinese a couple years ago, and I was just like one of the best movies I've ever seen in the theater. So good.
So definitely, Back to the Future is number 1. Any other standouts?
Yeah.
Five
Well, I mean,
more.
yeah. Yeah. I would say my second favorite movie is probably Evil Dead 2.
Oh,
Hell yeah.
wow. The
Any
second
reason
one, huh?
why that one and not the first one?
Yeah. I think the second one's better. Yeah. Like
Definitely.
yeah, like the first one's awesome. Like and it's super creative and stuff like that. And I love the story behind it. It's very inspiring, especially to a young filmmaker.
Mm-hmm.
But Evil Dead 2 is just like next level, like a very well, like it's sort of like they found their tone, and
I feel that too. I totally agree.
yeah, and they're just so like unapologetically like weird and funny, and it's super scary, and like you know, like I mean, like the sound design's amazing, the stunts are amazing, like Bruce Campbell's amazing, like it's so creatively executed, and I think it's super underrated, and you know, one of the greatest movies of the 80s. I would say number 3 for me is Bonnie and Clyde.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Warren Beatty.
Warren Beatty, Faye Dunaway at the pen. Yeah, like Gene Hackman, obviously.
Yeah.
That movie's great. Like editorially, it's kind of revolutionary. Like I think it's so beautiful. Like, and I think you know, it's one of the movies that really kind of pushed, you know, us or rather America out of like doing classic Hollywood movies and into doing like, you know, kind of I think the greatest like edgy like 70s era films. And you know, I like every time I watch it, I'm pretty impressed by it. And yeah, it's like personally, I was very taken with it the first time I saw it, and every time I come back with it, I always think it's amazing.
To study movies, yeah, that's on the list, I think.
Totally, and yeah, I mean, yeah, I have a pretty extensive list, so it's hard to top 6 is very, but yeah, let's. I mean, yeah, I would say my number 4 is probably Paper Moon.
Paper Moon.
Wow, Ryan, O'Neal?
Yeah, Ryan O'Neal. Yeah, exactly. Tatum O'Neal.
Yeah, youngest Oscar winner ever, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, she's and she's amazing in it. Like, it's black and white. Like, it's it's awesome. Yeah, but Peter Bogdanovich, directed it. I worked kind of as an assistant for a little bit, but this has been one of my favorite. It's also one of the I would say perfect movies, and it's just so it's pretty relentlessly charming. And if you haven't seen it, just take a look, man. It's so good, and it is aged so well. Considering it's coming out 50 years old here. But and then my next one's even older, City Lights.
Wow.
Which is but obviously pretty classic Charlie Chaplin. I think it's super. It's hard to spoil that movie because people have seen a lot of it, even if they don't think they have.
Right.
Because it's been a big influence on things. But it's my favorite silent movie. Probably my favorite movie before 1950, definitely. That's it's been a big influence on me just in terms of pacing and comedy and things like that. And then number 6 is Scott Pilgrim versus the World, which is
right on.
My favorite Edgar Wright movie, and I think it's editorially just super amazing and very next level. That's I think the most well edited, well sound designed film of the 21st century. It's just so good. And it kind of just wrapped in this kind of youthful, kind of hipster sort of veneer. People don't take it as seriously, but I think over time people are going to realize that how amazing that movie is, just from a crafts level. And also it's very special to me because being from Canada, I lived in Toronto during the time that movie takes place, and that sort of exaggerated fantasy version of Scott Pilgrim's world is where I lived for a couple of years, and so it's kind of very special to me. Anyway, so those are my. Again, they're highly personal, but they're I think all really great movies.
Yeah. Oh wow.
Nice, dude. I gotta say that is the most varied list we've come across.
Nice.
Really? Yeah. Sorry, I don't have enough. Probably don't have enough horror on there, but
No.
I got a sci-fi comedy, got crime, got a little bit of horror, got a drama, silent movie, and Scott Pilgrim.
Awesome, brother.
Cool. Thank you so much, guys, for having me. This is a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure.
You want to let people know where they can find you?
Yeah. You can find me on Twitter at TMacFilm. I'm pretty easy to reach, so look around and check out Tragedy Girls either on iTunes or Hulu, or Patchwork you can find on iTunes or any VOD platform. And it's also currently available on Netflix.
Right on. Cool, man. Well, have a good rest of your day. Thank you for your time.
Thanks for coming on again, bro.
Talk soon.
Right.
Okay, have a good one.
This is a Nekko Media podcast.